For those who don't know me, I'm Robin Sowell. I've been with ExpressionEngine since it was P Machine and Ellis Lab, and now it's PacketTide and Tom. I made up my title, which is Development Liaison, which basically means I do support. I've done support forever. I've done some coding. I can make my way through the code, but I can't understand things like how the models work. They're a black box and things. So this is a really good introduction to how I approach debugging. It works for the novice, and I think it's pretty good advice actually for even skilled coders. I'm not a coder, but I'm very good at logic. So we're going to start. This is a talk on debugging and how I approach it. I find it best is if you just know the solution when you go in. That makes it so much faster and so much easier to do. Here's a good example. And I really wish I could see your little faces. When you first start out with ExpressionEngine and this is the default template, and you're like, I'd really like to show the most recent in my sidebar. How cool would that be? And then you do it. It was really easy. And you're all excited because you feel like you've mastered this thing in like a day. It's awesome. And then you click a link to go to your entry with SoundCloud audio, and you totally lose all your latest entries. And you're like, what could that possibly be? Why did it break? Okay, I got to get out of here so I can see you. Somebody tell me why it broke. Okay, come on. You guys know this. This is obvious. Why did it break on that page?
Hey, Robin.
Thank you. Oh, yeah, I can hear you. Mm-hmm.
I'm here now, so I can support you by reading the chat or supporting you that way. Okay? Does that work?
Okay. I'm going to go big again and just yell at me.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Yeah, you guys know this, and it's super easy. I told you, that's by far the easiest way to debug is just know what the problem is and the solution, and it's really fast. When you don't know, though, it is much, much more difficult. The very first time you run into this, you can spend gross amounts of time on it. And it's really embarrassing when you've been doing it for like 15 years and you run into it and it still takes you like 5 minutes to be like, ooh, yeah, that's what that was. So yeah, and this was what my tag is, and it just needs that little dynamic no. And everybody who thinks that should be the default behavior is just wrong. I thought I'd add that in. Okay, here's another easy one. The following tag has a syntax error. The HTTP header tag, one of the fairly newer ones and very useful. What's going on there?
Module not installed, says Justin.
Justin would be correct. It's either not installed or a lot of times I'll make a typo. You'd be amazed at the different ways I can spell channel wrong. But yeah, that's all it is. You go over there. Oh, it wasn't installed. You install it. You have now solved the problem. So yeah, this is knowing the solution. So helpful. I had to go back in time for this one a little bit, but if you can't see it, it's a database error occurred. And sometimes you'll get this going just to log in. This is a bear. It can take your whole site down when you run into something like this. The table, this is actually a store table from back in the day, is marked as crashed and should be repaired. Okay, what's the problem there? And how do you fix it?
No answers yet.
Oh, come on. What's the problem? It says the table is marked as crashed and should be repaired.
This is the audience participation thing.
I know. This is where I need people in the room with me. It'd be much more threatening.
Oliver says, repair the table.
Yes, I know. This one is really kind of stupid. It's like, repair the table.
Roger says, could be out of disk space.
Oh, it could be. But again,
check HDD run repair table statement.
Okay, they're now way better than me because I'd be like, okay, how do I figure this out? The first time, Googled it because that would just tell me how to repair the table with PHP myadmin, which is awesome. But yeah, all of these, you know the solution right off the bat. They're not hard to figure out, right? So know the solution is we can stop the talk now. You should just do this. And debugging is very, very easy. If you don't know the solution, the first thing I turn to, Honestly, Google should get half of my paycheck at least. I Google so much. A lot of times I find answers on Stack Exchange or the forums, or I find answers I have written because I've done this for like 15 years and it's been a while. Yeah, Google. Google is awesome. There is no reason on earth. I mean, we just Googled for the repair statement. How do you repair a cable? Your host is going to come up. It's going to tell you how to do these things, right? So yeah, Google. The EE documentation actually is awesome. There's a rather large amount of it because we've gotten complex over time, but there's even a troubleshooting section where it mentions all of those MySQL errors, which you can also just find by Googling. Yeah, seriously, the documentation, absolutely go to if you're running something weird. Slack. I don't play in Slack that much, but I know it is where all the cool kids are. If you want an answer, joining Slack, and I think probably almost everybody in this room is probably on Slack. They're just great. It's kind of like the old forum. It's just really great resource. And Jace, I know Jace hangs out in there a lot. There's a lot of developers, our staff, they keep a good eye on Slack. GitHub also, Yuri mothers that like it's a baby chick. It's if you think there might be, if you're getting a PHP error, for example, GitHub issues, go search them first and search, take out open, right? So maybe it's an older issue, maybe it's been solved, maybe there's a pull request in. Absolutely, especially if it's a PHP issue, hit GitHub issues, super useful. And as I mentioned, Stack Exchange, we're really trying to put some manpower into keeping an eye on Stack Exchange. It's a good resource. The EE forums, we are a bit scattered now, so the EE forums is not the place, but it's one of the places. EE support, you can always just email support@expressionengine.com. And how I do support, well, hang on, paid support. We also have paid support you can sign up for. I think 1 month is like $100 or 99, which makes it much less than 100. 99 for a month, you can cancel it immediately, and basically I'll go in, and if you can give me FTP, I'll look and I'll figure things out. But you can also just hit me up in support. And if I can get it, if I can figure it out without having to actually get access and log in, I love doing that. And especially if you hit me with something like dynamic no is the answer. That's a really quick way to get an answer. If I can, I'll answer it there. So all of these resources give you a way to know the solution, because everybody forgets things. Anybody that knows all of the MySQL errors offhand, I'm super impressed by. I am not that person. I Google it every single time. It looks familiar, but I Google it. So yeah, tons of ways to know the solution. So let's do a few more just so I don't have to quit early and make it look really bad. Okay, you guys tell me what this is. This also would be very helpful. I can just write it down and go answer somebody's question.
Nothing yet. We're waiting
This one's
for
a little harder, but I know probably everybody in this room has run into it.
cookies, says Justin. Oliver says, reload the page. Cookies are not set, no consent.
Ooh, that's a good one.
XID from Justin. CSRF token from Rowan. Missing encrypt key from Jason Boothman.
Ooh, y'all are all good. So you're all right. It is a cross-site request forgery check, and the docs do a really good job of saying how we're checking for it and why. And you're also exactly right. If you don't know offhand, and you should read this, it's actually kind of interesting, and this is one of those things you'll run into. What happens when you land on an EE page, it sets a CSRF cookie. I think that's the name of it. That's just random for every person, it sets it. And then when you go to submit a form, every form has that token in it too. And your forms needs to match up. If it doesn't match up, it's going to give you this error message. And the reason for that is so somebody on another site can't fake a form and have you submit it over to our site saying, give me all your money, sort of thing. Because they won't know that cookie. It changes. It's not static. So that's the whole point of it, and it's actually a really important security measure. But there are a couple moving parts that have to be there. There's another way you can actually fail this. A lot of times, if you look in the docs, it does a good job of saying why posts will fail. A lot of times, you'll hit this if you are forcing HTTPS and you haven't changed your site URL. If you're forcing or not forcing www and you have a mismatch with your site URL. What happens is if you force a post to redirect, you lose the post data. So everything you put in that form gets lost. And then when it hits over here and it checks the cross-site request forgery, it's not there, so it fails. If your cookie's bad, it fails. There are a bunch of things that can go on that fails. So we know what's going on, but we don't quite know how to fix it yet, right? We're in the ballpark, but we don't know the exact problem yet. We can't fix it. Okay, so let's do this one. Okay, what's that? I know for sure there should be something showing up. It's beautiful. Super awesome. And this is happening. What do I do? Help me. I get this a lot, by the way.
Jason points out that it's a blank screen. Roger says error is masked, hit the control panel. Justin says PHP error, display errors off. Oliver says PHP error. Jay says Matt broke it. Rowan says,
has my vote.
Yeah, Rowan says could be logged out with no debugging.
Ooh,
Brian's advanced debugging, says Justin. Have you tried turning it off and on again? Asked Matt. This is a very interesting.
I'm writing all of these down to use the next time somebody comes in with one. Okay.
Jared says WSOD, which I don't know what that means.
WSOD.
Sorry, Jared. White screen of death. Oh, got it.
Oh, yes, he was correct.
Snowstorm, says Carl. Yeah.
We have many options, but nothing I can actually act on yet. So I think we got a little problem here. And the problem is knowing the solution is usually not that difficult. Figuring out the stupid problem is what takes all the time, right? If you know the problem, and many people think they know the problem and they're just wrong, and then we spend a lot of time solving the wrong thing. And by many people, I mostly mean myself. But yeah, you got to figure out the problem, right? You guys are all old heads. I really need to have a group of newbies because this would be more new to them. But knowing the problem, as somebody already mentioned, the first thing you got to do is you got to look for your error messages, right? So for example, here's an error message you might get. Something has gone wrong and this URL cannot be processed at this time. I mean, it's probably possible to have a less useful error message, but you'd have to work at it. Why am I getting that? Because I'm not logged in and our debugging isn't set to overwhelm just random Joe Stranger who's looking at that, okay? So we go to debugging and output, and we make sure our error visibility, and this is how I always run, shown to super admins only. If it's not live site, I always do it visible to everyone. And I actually usually do that in the config, however you want to do it. But yeah, at least I always like to run showing them to super admin, and when you are working on a new site and it's not live, visible to everybody. It makes no sense to hide that. So let's talk about error visibility. I flip that on, and here's my error message. I have an invalid conditional in my template. Please review my conditionals for an unclosed string or an invalid operator or missing closing curly thing. Yeah, it even tells me where to go look. Unexpected end of template and help me. What if? Let's see what that is. Yeah, okay. Well, that was pretty obvious there. I'm missing my closing if tag. You got to look at debugging. Okay? The debugging is just the go-to. If it's not on, you're just hiding things. Okay. Let's go back to our white screen of death, which I should have known the acronym for. I get this a lot with, and I always feel bad for them. end users who are on version 2 and have been using EE for like 10 years without ever upgrading it. And then they upgrade their host upgrades to PHP 7. And they're like, everything's down. They can't access the CP. Everything is horrible and bad, and they have no information, right? And even trying to walk them through figuring it out is hard. For this, you got a couple options because you can't log in. The whole thing is down and broken. One is simply the debug config override, and it's exactly the same as setting it in the control panel. You can hide them all. You can show them to super admins, or you can show them to everyone. The problem with this is you will have to show them to everyone if we're in that situation where everything's broken because you can't log in. Honestly, it's not a big deal for 5 minutes, probably. Though on version 2, we might have shown more information than, I mean, we've really locked that stuff down in version 4, 5, and 6. But yeah, that's one option. The other option, and this is what I prefer to do, your main admin PHP file, your index file, and your system index file all have a debug override as well. It's 0 and 1, whereas the other one is 0, 1, 2, just for variety. I will go and do this one. So I leave the front end so you're not seeing errors, and I will go into the back end and see my errors that way. It's just a little bit more secure. They don't need to see a lot of errors on the front end. If you can get access and log in, then that's great. And sometimes you'll get here and you'll realize it is just, oh, your this happens not a lot, but it does happen. Your session table gets corrupt because it gets a lot of writes and reads and deletes and everything. And yeah, that it's just down and that breaks everything. All you gotta do is run a quick repair. You'll be able to see it going here. Okay, so that's one of the first things. Now these drive me nuts. I don't know what to call them, but sneaky errors. I'll have a user that's on a current version of ExpressionEngine, and they'll be getting an error submitting a form a lot of times in the control panel, and I cannot replicate it to save my life. For some reason, my setup, and it's not just my setup, some server setups, if you submit a form and there's an error, they stop and they display the error. Mine just goes on its happy way. If it's just a warning, it's like, whatever, we're just going to go keep going, right? I never see the error. Now, you should be able, and you should be checking your server error logs, period. But some people don't have them. Some people don't know how to get to them. This I really actually like doing, and I always turn this on when I'm doing a dev site, doing basic debug. EE will log your errors, and it's not just PHP errors or warnings, but also you can log a lot. You can log too much. If you log all messages, it's very difficult to keep up with, but you might do it for 5 minutes if you're looking at a certain thing, and it's telling you what's getting called. It gives you a whole lot of information, but I will at least keep on errors, including PHP errors, if I'm doing a dev site. And this way I catch those little things. I'll turn that on and I'll go look. And I'm like, ah, he's right. It is throwing a warning when I submit a new entry that I never ever saw. So this is, like I say, if you, I turn it on. It doesn't hurt. Turn it off when you're running a live site. It's a lot of logging. But yeah, this is super helpful. You need to, this is all you do. It's a config override, log date format, log threshold. I put it on 1. You can see you have to make the logs folder, and then it just logs a file. Now this kind of gives you a hint of the ways in which it's less useful, because it will give you errors for things that aren't breaking things and aren't really required. In this case, I had a test. I thought that was a test file, but it's a regular one. It's just saying the language file contains no data, which isn't a problem. It's not a PHP error. So you do have to wade through a little bit of it, but it's really useful. Take a look at that if you think something's going on. Okay, so know the problem. Those are our error messages of various types, but also debugging I use a lot, and it's just setting the same thing. I also keep developer logs on until they start annoying me, but just to see what might need to look. But the debugging will show you the MySQL front end and back end, and it will show the template parsing on the front end, which is just incredibly useful. So say you didn't know that dynamic parameter issue, right? And you didn't want to go ask everybody else and that show you you're a newbie or anything. This is a way you can, I actually really use this a fair bit. It's usually embarrassing when I figure out the problem, but it's quick and fairly easy. Okay, so I've got my debug on, right? And it does a couple things. It'll show the variables. It's very useful showing the load time, and that's how long it takes ExpressionEngine to hand it off to the server, not necessarily how long it takes the server to load it. But the things I mostly look at are the queries and the templates. And I like to look at the number. It'll show you if any of them are slow. And then the template parsing. So this is the queries. Template parsing is really useful. It's going to show it loading up any embeds. It's going to show it passing it off to your layouts. It's going to show you all your tags. It's also a good way to see if something's slow because it's showing you the time and the memory being used between each log step, right? In this case, I'm really curious to see what's going on with that blog channel tag I put in there that's now broken on the one where we shake it off page. And I go down and I find it, and okay, blog limit 5, everything looks fine. This is I didn't see anything weird, and there's just like there's like 90 queries, and I don't know. There are a bunch of them are related to channels, and that's all confusing, and I don't know. So the next thing I always try and do if I can is simplify by like making things way less complicated and verbose so that they're easier to understand. That's very important. That's what I do. I go on and I just put just the tag I'm interested in, just exactly like it is existing, but I just like output the title or something. Make it easy. Okay. Then what I'll do, I'll dig through the queries. And at this point, there's still like maybe 50, but there's only one that really looks like it's looking at the channel, right? And in fact, it tells me, oh, look, this is mod channel doing it. And it's how it builds the SQL query. So I look at those right there, and it's really pretty darn obvious which queries I'm interested in. And I copy them over so they're readable. Okay, so here's the one I thought was pretty interesting after looking at a couple. I've got like select my entry ID and left join it with the channel so I know I'm getting the blog. I don't want anything with the entry ID blank. I'll make sure I'm getting the right site. All this is sounding good so far. Entry date less than the future. Okay. Here's my expiration date. That's interesting. Expiration date less than, oh, okay, the future. So it's not expired. That's what we're looking at there. Got our channel ID, we got our URL title, the one where we shake it FF. Well, that appears to be our problem. We're only pulling back for that URL title. And now I've figured out dynamic no all by myself without having to ask everybody. And it still only took maybe 10 minutes if I'm new to this. I almost never do it for dynamic off, but I will tell you, I do it for sticky and expiration dates more than one would assume. Also stuff like site ID. I don't know, it's very helpful to be able to look and see what's going on. Sometimes I will take this, I will copy paste it and put it in and run the query myself and then take out parts until I get back a result, if that makes any sense. And that way I can really identify the part that's jamming me up. Maybe it's the expiration date. I don't know. But yeah, you just pick it apart that way. You're simplifying. You're getting it down to the real basics. And I went the wrong way. Sorry. Yeah. Oh, this one's fun. This one, it took 2 developers staring at it for probably 10 minutes before we figured it out. This was a Goobered fluid field. So yeah, basically we had a big fluid field called homepage. This is very typical of how you'll see a fluid field used. And in home page, you've got a body field you can add, and you've also got testimonials. Body's just like a text area. The testimonials were actually a grid, I believe. Okay, so we got this, nothing weird. If you go back, there should only be one entry, and there should be one testimonial. We got a limit of 1 on our testimonials, right? And we're ordering them by random. We keep getting 2. Oh no, seriously, this is just like, bleh. I stare at it, I can't figure out. I'm like, okay, well, let's simplify it. Maybe that'll help. So we simplify it. I do this all the time. If you're on support, sometimes I'll do it for you. If you're not on support, I'll be like, oh, go simplify it, and then let me see what you did. But yeah, you simplify it. We did this. Well, that worked. We're only seeing the body once. Okay, so that's good. Okay, the testimonials are giving us the problem. What the heck is going on there? No, I'm going to sit here until you tell me. It took me a few minutes.
Testimonials tag not closed.
Yeah, that was embarrassing.
Excel sheet.
Yeah, it took me way longer than that. That was it. Testimonial tags not closed. But see how much easier it is to figure out on this page versus that page. Okay, break this stuff down. Get it simple as you can. It makes life so much easier. Okay, we fixed that. Oh, this one's still in progress. And it happened with anyway. We're getting a CAPTCHA fail. Somebody's got a guest allowed to post on the channel entry form. They're requiring CAPTCHA, and it's failing. I set it up on a brand new clean install of 6 locally, and I try it, and it works for me. I'm like, I don't know. We throw out a lot of ideas, and I'll take any that you guys have. I'll tell you this right now. We haven't solved this one. But what'd y'all come up with? So this is channel entry form, submitting it, getting CAPTCHA word fails, and it works for me on 606. So I'm not even cheating and using some like 6.1 or something.
Greg says permissions. XLCHA says caching. That's what Justin also says. Write permissions on CAPTCHA folders, says Roger.
How might you go at trying to figure out if any of those are right?
Jason says clearly they are fat fingering it.
Clearly, that's it. It could be.
They didn't submit the word exactly as it appears in the image, says Jace.
I mean, honestly, that does happen way more than you'd think. This is
Greg,
why I like we're on the page support. I can go do it myself. I'm like,
right.
Okay.
Greg says turn off the cap locks.
I'm going to send all of these suggestions. No, I'm not.
Roger,
they'd be mad at me.
Yeah. Roger says PEBCAC, which I don't know what that means. PEBKAC.
No,
oh, and everybody's saying, yep. And problem exists between the keyboard and chair. Yeah, I did know that one.
I'm so telling them, and they're going to be mad at me, and they might even be at this conference. So I'm just going to say. Okay, here's what I did. And honestly, we haven't figured it out. And it is weirder than it sounds. And honestly, the cache idea has value. So here's what, I mean, we ran through everything I could think of. Some of the things I would try maybe would be try it on, like a mail form just to see if CAPTCHA is working. We did try it removing the CAPTCHA requirement, and the form itself works. And again, I tried it on mine, so I knew that it shouldn't be a kind of generic bug with the channel form. So then this does not look, well, for non-developers, this does not look simple, but for devs, you're probably going, yeah, this is a simple way to figure out what the heck's going on. Okay, so I had the error. I looked up CAPTCHA word and figure out where we are, and we know it's the channel form. So we pulled up all this, and I'm like, okay, let's pull up the channel form lib and see what's going on in there. And honestly, if you search this one for the CAPTCHA word, and it only shows up in a few places, and you get here, and again, you don't need to be a developer. I am not a developer, but it says CAPTCHA check. Okay, that's a pretty good hint right there. Should require CAPTCHA again. You know, you can follow that. You're like, okay, if they're requiring the CAPTCHA, here's what happens. And it says, okay, is there a CAPTCHA word? No, then that's an error. You got to have the word, but that's not the error we're getting. So keep going. What's it doing? And again, even for a non-dev, if you take it slow, you can see it's kind of looking for three things. It's looking for, does the word match? Does the IP address match? And is the date, it's not too old. You don't even have to know all of that stuff, right? If you don't, nothing comes back, then you got an error. And we know that's the error. A lot of times I don't know it's the error. What I'll do, where it says lane CAPTCHA incorrect, if I'm just not sure, I'll just like add some stuff to that. Like CAPTCHA incorrect, la la la. Seriously, if you see that, I was probably in your code. So that way, though, when you see it come back, you'll be like, okay, that's exactly where I think I am, because you're not always where you think you are. But yeah, you figure that's where you are. One thing you can do a couple things here. You can comment out the IP address and the date. Those are both things that are possible to screw up. You might have a proxy IP. It's not getting IPs right. Take that out. If it works without the IP address, you know that's the problem. Sometimes the dates are just wrong. You're on a oh, what do you call it? Anyway, your date's wrong. You take it out, see if it still works. Now where this got really interesting is they commented it out and then it worked, and then they uncommented it out and it still worked, and then something else broke when they were doing it inline, which kind of sounds a little like maybe caching. I've definitely seen that where editing the file clears some sort of server cache. Yeah, it's interesting. We haven't solved it yet, but this is what I did to try and get at it. I wanted to see, well, what is exactly it looking for to cause it to fail? It's really another form of simplifying the problem, right? We get in here, we got three things it can be to throw that error. We know that. So you play around with them. And then you get something like, oh, it works now just because I saved the file. Okay, well, that's another hint. Okay, so that was the CAPTCHA fail, which is actually a fairly interesting problem. Lord. You guys are basically getting my last couple of months worth of really annoying problems. That's what this is really the talk. Okay, this was so annoying. Oh my goodness. So, upgrading from 603 to 606, which is not a big upgrade. It should not be a problem. It was failing in Preflight. Tom's like, see if it's a zip archive. I'm like, okay, maybe it's a zip archive. So we got a stack trace, right? There's no mention of the zip archive. It is basically the pre-flight check, right? The unpack. I go in there and I dump debug because you can. We have a lot of debug going on in the one-click upgrade, and we record it. It's easy to see. It's in a cache file. I love that we do that. It makes my life so easy. I just boom, boom, boom. How far did I get? And it's failing. It was just failing when it loaded one class. It didn't even do anything with it. I could not figure it out to save my life. I went back and I looked. There was like a 75 message Slack discussion of this with me whining about it. I literally spent hours on it. And then I looked at the browser debug, which I had kind of looked at, but do you guys see what it was? I drew a big blue arrow, but I don't know if it's big enough you guys can see it.
Matt says it looks familiar.
Honestly, I don't remember whose it was, but if you can see it over in the JSON response, the message is class zip archive not found. Oh my lord. Seriously, it's what Tom said like 5 minutes into this game. It's sending the stack trace, and we can see the stack trace, but it's not displaying that actual message, which would be a nice thing for it to display. But if I had looked at the post like I should have 5 minutes into debugging this, I would have immediately known what it was and not wasted everybody's time. So there was that. Always, always, always look at this. It was just, I don't know how I missed it. It was annoying. But then we fixed it. So now we know. And we are going to make that message a little, so you know exactly why we stopped the pre-flight check. This looks familiar. We just did this. Okay, so you guys had a whole bunch of ideas, and everybody understands how the cross-site request forgery check works now. And really, there could be quite a few things going on to make it the post data not match up to the cookie data, right? Something screwing up the post, something screwing up the cookies, a few other things, but we know where to look, right? So I go and I check my browser, and I submitted it, and well, this is interesting. I'm testing. I look in storage, and I like Firefox Developer for testing. I just think it's easier. But whatever your favorite is. There are no cookies here. Whoever said cookies wins a cookie. And if you look down, and I'm going to zoom in a little bit so it's easier to see. If you look at the headers on that response, you can see right there, set cookies. So like the last visit cookie, expiration, okay, expiration's in the future, that looks good. Max age, no clue. Path, domain, borked.com. My site is not borked.com. It can't set a cookie. I've got my cookie domain incorrect. It's failing. Boy, I'll tell you one that shows up a lot. Well, not a lot, but it's not unusual, especially on dev sites. They're requiring secure cookies. So HTTPS, which is great, but they're doing it on a dev server, which they don't have HTTPS, and they break. And boy, that can be a hard one to track down. You're like, why is this breaking? It seems to break just weird. I can't log in. And that's why you can't log in. It's not able to set a cookie. Anyway, the point being not the cookie thing so much as pay attention to this data. Take a look at what your browser's telling you, especially if it's anything Ajaxy. That's where you need to be looking. I can't remember. I recently had one where I kept doing view source, and the source didn't have something in it, but if I did the if I looked at it in the browser debug, it was there. I was like, oh, that's sneaky. I can't remember what it was. Anyway, use this. Incredibly useful. And that is my talk on debugging. It's actually often a lot of fun. It's like little mysteries. Things that aren't fun are not being able to log in. Drives me nuts. I'm like, I really want to go play in your code. Or you have to be super careful in the code. I always love it when somebody has a development site, and it makes your life so much easier if you have a dev site. I do try and replicate everything locally, but I'm telling you, you get on somebody else's server and there could be major quirks. Or another thing, simplifying. I take htaccess out a lot of times. I'll take it out entirely if we're on a dev server, and I can, and just use index.php just to, again, simplify, eliminate as many sources of error as you possibly can to zero in very, very quickly. Another one I do a lot when I'm on somebody else's server is if it's in a template, I will put up a template and just put hello world on it and make sure that's coming up. A lot of times I will put up a file that says hello world, so I know I'm actually where I think I am, because that has happened so many times that I can't figure out why I'm not fixing it, and I'm in the wrong folder or in the wrong server, and that happens. You logging into somebody else's, and sometimes somebody else that doesn't have a whole lot of knowledge, or somebody who's just got a really complicated system and they're used to it and you're not, and you're over here in public and you're supposed to be over here in dev or something. So yeah, simplify, make sure where you're at, get it as easy as you possibly can, eliminate as many other sources of error as possible. Because usually once you've figured out the problem, figuring out the solution isn't that big a deal. Okay. What time is it? Ah! My timing was pretty good. That was a miracle. Okay.
We had a bunch of comments that I didn't read out to you, mostly because you have coworkers that are funny.
No, I don't. Those must be other people.
You have coworkers in the industry who are funny. Anyway, there are a bunch of comments in the thread. There have been no QA. I may or may not have been talking about Boothman. There were there were no QA items thus far, but I didn't stop your flow to ask some questions. Let me see if I can go find them.
Yeah, I actually figured somebody might have a problem. This will be a fun one to do, though. We will do this sometime in person, and we've got to get like newbies, because I'm betting you guys all knew 95% of this, right?
So I've got this MSM site. I'm just kidding.
Oh yeah, that was the other thing I hate, when people have MSM sites. Actually, they're not that bad. There are things I hate though. Windows. I hate Windows. They're like, how do I set these permissions? I'm like, that's why you have a server admin. That is not me. Okay, we all good?
Does anybody have any questions for
we
Robin?
can take a break before the sum up. Is Lydia doing that one?
Oh,
you did?
Oh, Justin just added one.
He's just messing with me.
I often would say, can you see that the QA tab?
I'm thinking.
Okay.
I think the general principle, and I'll throw some other things out. This would probably apply less to you because it's your site.
Robin, can you repeat the question in case people who are watching the video can't read it?
How often would you say you run into scenarios where there's something wrong, where what you covered today didn't help? So far, we haven't fixed that CAPTCHA one, but I do think it's helped, because part of helping is eliminating things. There are things I just don't understand. I certainly things outside of my control, especially server things. I will bug mad about them, but I really, what was it? Somebody was getting one of the MySQL errors that basically means you are out of space, right? You're out of space. Now, I helped them by telling them that's what it is, and I wrote it up saying you need to talk to your host, and I think it was Rackspace. I think they were on a unmonitored server. So I didn't help them in the sense that I didn't fix their problem, but actually I told them exactly what their problem was, and they need to have a server admin. So actually, I don't think that applies to that question. There are definitely times when I can't fix it for them, right? That would be one. I can't do that, but I can tell you exactly what it is, and I can tell you what need to help. Things that are bugs that I just can't fix, and there are. Anything really with the deep models I can't fix. Anything with JavaScript I can't fix. I don't know JavaScript. I'm terrible at it. But yeah, the stuff I just don't know. I think the advice would probably be good for debugging it, though. I don't think that advice is ever bad for debugging. Simplify it. Try and find out the problem. Bree's got one, sorry. I get an irritating error that I cannot figure out. Whenever I try to paginate or delete comments, I see this. Insufficient. Basically, a serialized array is dorked. And those kind of errors are annoying because you don't know where exactly they're coming from. Service model, column, serialized, native. That's in the control panel, right? Must be. Probably what I would do is exactly what I said normally. I would go to find that line. And what's happening is you've got a bad serialized array. probably from the table, but I would dump it out there so I'd know exactly what I was dealing with. What is bad? Because without knowing that, you're kind of guessing. But I'm betting it's the table. But that's exactly what it is. When they do a serialized array, they basically say how many bits of things should be in there, and if they're not that many bits, it's going to throw an unserialized error. And the first thing I would want to know is exactly what that array is. Anybody else seen it though? I mean, I have not been deleting comments much. First thing I do though, I would go in there and I would just dump out the serialized array and figure out what I'm dealing with, which I would bet money is the table. But somewhere some data is borked up. Service model column. But see, that's my usual advice. Go in there and simplify it. Right now, we don't know what's causing the problem. That's the first thing we'd want to take a look at. And I would have to get that fixed because that would drive me nuts. Any other coming in?
Just seeing lots of people saying thank you over in the other chat. I did post the links for speaker and conference feedback. Whoops, except I screwed them up, so I'm going to repost them. Please do give us a comment about your experience so that we can make both the speakers, give the speakers an opportunity to improve and make the conference better so that you guys enjoy it and get more value out of it.
See you guys all at the sum up.
Yep, sum up starts in 12 minutes. There'll be a single session opening that you can go join in about 8 minutes or so.
Cool.
Thanks very much, Robin.